There was no warning at all. 1 second Bruce Lee was sitting at the judges' table with a scoring card in front of him, and the next a hand the size of a dinner plate had closed on the front of his jacket and was dragging him up and over the table, out of his own chair, into the open 400 pounds of Grand Champion, having decided without a word to throw the small judge across the floor in front of 10,000 people. 2 men at that same table came up out of their seats to stop it, and Bruce, already half-hauled over the table, his feet scrambling for the floor, threw his free hand out toward them, flat, hard, stay back, and the 2 most dangerous men in the building froze with their hands out and did not come. To understand why a Grand Champion would reach across a judge's table and attack a man who was only sitting there, you have to understand what had been building in him all afternoon and what it does to a monument to feel the ground move under it in front of his own people. But understand this part first, because it is the part that made it so dangerous. This was not a match. Nobody was squared off. Nobody was ready. Bruce Lee was a guest of honor, a judge, seated at a skirted table along the edge of the floor with 2 other guests of honor beside him, a boxing legend in a white shirt and a karate champion in a black gen, there to watch and to score and to be seen, in dress clothes, in soft chairs, with cups of tea. A man does not brace for violence at the judges' table. That is the one place in the whole arena where violence is not supposed to be able to reach you, which is exactly why the champion reached for him there. His name does not survive in most tellings, only his rank, Yokozuna, Grand Champion of Sumo, the highest title the oldest combat sport on earth can give. He was close to 400 pounds over a frame that could squat a car, and he had held his rank for years, through a childhood of brutal training and 10,000 collisions, and underneath the mass were the strongest legs in professional sport, and a base no man had ever broken. He had come to this international exhibition to represent his art before the world, and for the first part of the afternoon, the crowd had given him the awe a people reserve for a living monument. If you want to understand why the monument cracked, stay with this, because it was not planned cruelty. It was the oldest wound a champion can take, and it was dealt to him by a sound. Earlier in the program, the small man at the judges' table had been asked to give a brief demonstration of his own art, and he had stepped onto the floor for only a minute, and he had just moved, a short burst of that impossible speed for the crowd, and the arena had made a sound for him that it had not made for the champion, newer, hungrier, louder. The champion, sitting in the place of honor as the afternoon's greatest attraction, had heard the roar go to a man a quarter his size and felt the thing every aging king feels when the room turns its head, that the crowd he had owned his whole life was in an instant looking at someone else. He said nothing. He smiled for the cameras. And underneath it, all afternoon, the wound worked in him, and the pride that had made him great would not let it heal, and by the time the scoring came around and he passed near the judges' table on his way across the floor, the wound had become a decision. He would show them, he would show all 10,000 of them, in one motion, what the difference really was between a man who danced for a crowd and a man who could pick that dancer up and throw him. And the small man was right there, seated, soft, unready, a perfect target, so the champion reached across the table and took hold of him and hauled him up to do it. It happened so fast that the reactions came a beat late, in a ragged wave across the whole bowl of the arena. A woman in the front row screamed. Photographers who had been resting their cameras snapped them up and started firing on instinct. Officials at the neighboring tables shot to their feet, chairs scraping. 10,000 people who had come for a peaceful exhibition surged upright all at once, because there is a specific horror in watching a seated man, a judge, a guest, get seized without warning by the largest human being any of them had ever seen, and not one of them in that first second believed the small man could possibly survive it. Here is the first thing worth staying for, because it happened in the half-second before Bruce had even found his feet, and it told you everything about him. He was being dragged over a table by 400 pounds. Any human instinct says grab, claw, protect yourself. And the boxer and the karate champion were already moving, already up, 2 elite fighters lunging to pull the giant off their friend. And in that half-second, Bruce Lee's first act was not to save himself. It was to throw his free hand out toward the two of them and stop them, palm flat, arm rigid, an order, because if either of those men laid hands on a grand champion in front of 10,000 people and 100 cameras, it became an international incident, a brawl, a disgrace, and Bruce would not have it. He would rather face the giant alone, half pulled from his chair, than let his friends be dragged into the wreck of it. The boxer said, for the rest of his life, that he had never seen a braver half-second than that one, a man in the grip of something that could kill him, spending his one free hand to protect the people running to help. And then Bruce answered the giant, and it was not a demonstration, and it was not gentle, and it was the most real 30 seconds that arena would ever hold. Stay with this, because a man hauled off balance out of a chair by someone who outweighs him by 250 pounds is by every rule of fighting already finished, and the way Bruce refused to be finished is a lesson in itself. He did not fight the pull. You cannot outpull 400 pounds, and trying is how smaller men get thrown. He did the opposite of what every instinct demands. He went with it, let the haul bring him up and in toward the giant instead of away, killing the distance the throw needed to work. A throw is a lever, and a lever needs room to swing. A body pulled in tight against the thrower has taken the room away, so instead of being flung out across the floor, he arrived chest to chest, inside the champion's reach, in the one place where 400 pounds of leverage suddenly had almost nothing to push against. And in that instant of closeness, he attacked the one thing 400 pounds cannot armor, the nerves under the gripping forearm. Muscle can be built past any limit, but the nerve that runs beneath it cannot be trained to stop screaming, and Bruce drove his elbow and then the edge of his hand into the exact points where the nerve runs shallow over the bone, fast, 3 times, and the vast hand clamped in his jacket, flooded with a pain it could not push through, sprang open against its owner's will. Bruce hit the floor on his own 2 feet, loose now free, and a striker who is loose against a giant is an entirely different problem than a judge being dragged from a chair. The champion roared and charged, and this is where 10,000 people stopped breathing at once, because the small man did not run and did not clinch. He met the charge the way you are told never to meet it, by not being where it arrived. He stepped off the line at the last possible instant, and 400 pounds of committed forward mass thundered past him into empty air, and as it passed he struck, really struck, a short savage blow-up under the short ribs, where even a mountain is soft, and a second to the side of the thick neck, blows carrying every ounce of the speed that had made him a legend. The champion did not fall. He was too vast to fall from a punch. But he felt them all the way down, and for the first time in years his face showed something that was not certainty. He came a third time, slower, hurting, because pride was all he had left. And Bruce ended it on the one principle that brings down anything, however large. And stay with this, because it is worth knowing. A mountain does not fall because you are stronger than the mountain. It falls because it stands on a base, and a base can be taken. As the champion lunged, Bruce dropped beneath the grasping arms and drove a precise kick into the side of the lead knee, not to cripple it, angled exactly enough to buckle the joint and take the foundation out from under 400 pounds all at once. And the mountain came down. Not thrown, toppled, by its own weight landing on a base that was no longer beneath it, the grand champion crashing to the boards in a fall that shook the ring, beaten, sitting stunned on the floor of his own arena while a man a quarter his size stood over him, breathing hard, unhurt, having done in 30 seconds what every person in that building would have sworn could not be done. The arena did not roar. It had gone into the vast silence of a crowd that came to worship a monument and watched it fall, and in that silence Bruce did the thing that decided how it would be remembered forever. He did not stand over the beaten man in triumph. He stepped back, lowered his hands, and then he stepped in again and offered the grand champion his open hand to help 400 pounds up off the floor. And here is the part worth staying for, because it was not the tidy forgiveness these stories usually end on. The champion did not take the hand right away. He sat on the boards and looked up at the small man with the wreckage of his certainty all over his face, and what passed between them was harder and more honest than any bow. The recognition between two men who had just genuinely fought, that one had been beaten cleanly in front of everyone, and that there was no version of it he could tell himself where it had not happened. It cost him everything to lift his arm. But under the pride he was a real champion, and a real champion knows the truth of a thing done to his own body, and after a long moment he took the offered hand and let the small man help him rise, and only then did the arena break, not into a bloodthirsty roar but into the strange, overwhelmed, thunderous applause of 10,000 people who knew they had seen something they would describe badly for the rest of their lives. At the judges' table, the boxer and the karate champion had not moved since the hand waved them off. The boxer, a man almost impossible to impress, was shaking his head slowly. The karate champion beside him wore the still, studying look of a professional who had just watched a problem he'd have called unsolvable get solved in real time. Neither of them had been allowed to help. That had been the whole meaning of the raised hand, and they both knew it, and both would tell the story the same way for the rest of their lives, not leading with the knee or the grip break, but with the thing that came first, a man yanked from his own chair by a giant, using his one free hand in the worst half-second of the afternoon to keep his friends out of the fire. The grand champion did not vanish into shame. That is the part the neat version gets wrong. A proud man who had never been beaten had just been beaten by something entirely outside his art, and instead of hating it, he did the thing only the truly great sometimes do, which is become curious about it. He found the small man afterward, away from the crowd, and they sat on folding chairs at the edge of the emptying arena and talked a long time through an interpreter. The giant asked how a man could strike hard enough to hurt him and move fast enough to survive him, and the small man told him the truth, with no false modesty, that he could never have beaten the champion at the champion's own game, that if that grip had finished its work there would have been nothing he could do, that it was the most dangerous thing he had ever felt, and that the only reason he had won was that he had refused from the very first instant to fight the fight the champion wanted. The champion, who had spent a lifetime forcing every man to fight his fight, sat with that a long moment and nodded slowly, because it was the truest thing anyone had said to him in years. The story traveled, the way these things do, and over the years the people who only half heard it would say it was about a small man beating a giant, and they would be missing the thing that mattered. Because the ones who were actually there, the boxer, the karate champion, the officials frozen at their tables, never led with the win. They led with the ambush, and the half-second inside it, when a man was hauled out of the one chair in the whole arena where he should have been safe, with 400 pounds closing around him, and no time and no warning, and the very first thing he did, before he saved himself, was throw out a hand to the friends coming for him, and tell them without a word to stay back, because some fights a man decides before he even has his feet under him that he is going to carry alone.